right, welcome to my home. This is my office. You might occasionally hear my dog in the background, or he might come over here and wander and say hi. So if you see me petting something, that would be my Australian Shepherd. The reason that I'm doing this lecture is because we've been covering Hinduism over the last several weeks, and it's clear that there are certain concepts that need further clarification based on some of the questions that you've been asking me. Among those are the concept of the relationship between Rita and Dharma. And I think also the concept between Rita and Brahman might be helpful as well. So I thought I'd just take a few minutes to clarify on this video rather than separately writing to each person because I want everybody to benefit from this clarification. So before I start talking about specifically the concept of Rita, it's very important that you understand that because Hinduism is a religion, it's the oldest living religion in the world, these concepts have undergone a tremendous amount of evolution. So it's helpful if you want to understand modern Hindu concepts. It's important to understand kind of the earliest form of Hinduism to see how those concepts have evolved with time and to see how there's a connection, which there is, between these newer concepts and these older concepts. It's kind of funny because when I say newer concepts, some of them are like 2,000 years old. So there you go. Excuse me. So first, let me talk about how the oldest form of Hinduism understands the nature of the world, all right? You have to understand that from the Hindu perspective, we have the principles of non-existence and existence, or the forces of non-existence and existence. Non-existence does not mean non-being. What non-existence means is the kind of fundamental level of existence before anything happens. So it's kind of unmoving. It's the potential. It has potentiality, but that potentiality hasn't been actualized yet. All right, but that is prior to any kind of manifestation. All right, so it's important that you understand that at the most prior level is this level of non-existence. This is important to understand because if you're going to understand the concept of Dharma, you need to understand why it is doing our duty matters in terms of the regulation of the order of things, okay, at a cosmic level and not just at our kind of manifest human level here, our cultural level. All right, so that's the way that they understand things. So if you look at one of the creation myths, one of the most fundamental creation myths is the story of the forces of non-existence represented by Vitra and the forces of existence which are represented by Indra. And the two forces kind of fight each other, and Indra representing possibility, creation, life, the creative forces, ends up winning out at the end of the day. Now, why is this important? It's important because at the most fundamental level is non-existence. That means that in order for things to continue at the manifest level, it needs continual input and energy for that to occur. For those things to continue to function properly requires continual input. All right? So in the very earliest days, well, at least the ones that we know about, this was done through yana, through ritual sacrifice. And what ritual sacrifice does is it enabled, through these sacrifices, people to be able to tap into that more fundamental level of reality where there's power, where there is, that's what we have to tap into in order for us to have the kind of power that we need to exercise those possibilities. So now, the thing to understand about this older form of Hinduism, which is what we call the Vedic religion, that's what we've been talking about, is that the gods and goddesses are not prior to that most fundamental level, all right? They're part of manifest existence. Now, how did all of it start? How did manifest existence start? How did all the differentiation start? We don't know. there's something in the Vedas called the hymn of origination. And at the end of the day, they hint that there's something, but they don't exactly know what it is, but that there was something there. All right. So that's really what I wanted to first explain to you, is this concept that there's this, if we don't continue to put our energies and our input in the right ways and the right ordering of things, they will collapse, everything will collapse back into that state of non-existence, which is not non-being, it's just, like I said, it represents the potentiality, the unboundedness, the undetermined, the ground of things, the unmoving, but it's not manifest reality. So manifest reality is secondary. So what we do when we do sacrifices, especially if we sacrifice to a god, what we're doing is we're helping them in their job of doing what they ought to do to regulate the order of things. And the order of things is Rita. So Rita is the most fundamental structural principle. It's the norm which kind of reverberates through all of creation. That is what Rita is. It is also absolutely foundational. It represents the most basic ordering principle. It regulates functions of existence, and it represents undivided wholeness. Okay? So remember, what's primary is wholeness. What is secondary is manifestation, and as soon as you manifest something, you begin to differentiate, right? So what's secondary is differentiation. What's primary is wholeness. All right, got that? So when priests originally did these sacrifices, what they were doing was controlling the power of Rita through the ritual action of Yana, of the sacrifice. Okay? Now, we see some questions being asked in the earliest literature that says, yeah, but what came before this? What's happening? And that's what you get in the later literature of the Upanishads, where a lot of what we understand Hinduism to be today, those key ideas such as karma, moksha, Brahman, all of these ideas, although rooted in this earlier Vedic religion, really begin to emerge because they're asking certain questions, and from these questions emerge these concepts. So Rita is kind of part of the older concept of Hinduism, but it's going to undergo some evolution. So we no longer hear talk of Rita because it gets transmuted. Transforms into and kind of is incorporated into concepts such as Dharma and Brahman. And what I mean is not Brahman the priests. I mean Brahman as ultimate reality. All right? So the exploration of the concept of Rita as that underlying principle of all things, which we find in earlier Vedic literature, is going to lead to the development of the concept of Brahman as the underlying ground of everything that exists. All right? So it's, like I said, we're not using the same word, but you can see how it's related to this older concept of Rita. But before we explore some of these developments, I wanted to just mention a little bit what it is that Yana, the ritual sacrifice, did in connection with Rita. The reason I want to explore this is because although there's still rituals that are done in Hinduism today, and although they still serve a purpose that's not unlike what we find here, a lot of that has been internalized so that we do a lot of the things to connect with deeper levels of reality in other ways, like through meditation and practice of yoga and things like that, yogic practices. But to understand these later practices, again, you have to go back to the earlier practices. So what is it that Yana is enabling us to do in connection with Rita? Well, Yana allows us to participate in Rita, right? And therefore connect with what's ultimately the deeper level of reality. And in doing that, as Rita is engaged as the normative foundational principle, which is kind of reverberating through creation, we participate in that renewal. Now, we don't even participate passively. Our actions actually aid that process of renewal that is occurring. So it's a two-way street. We aid the process of renewal, but we in turn receive a form of empowerment to as we live and tap into these deeper processes. So this continuous renewal is really key. Without it, the manifest reality which we see around us, without that continual input, it would what do I say? It's not return. Well, I guess I'll use return for now. It would return or to its primordial state. And remember that primordial state is what's most fundamental. The manifest state is the secondary state. And if we don't keep inputting in some way, we will return to that primordial state. Hopefully, this is becoming a little more clear to you. If not, I'm really sorry. Okay, so anyway, Yana then becomes a way that we tap into those processes and rhythms of existence, which are Rita. And we tap in for ourselves, we get something out of it, but then we also energize and renew the processes through that sacrificial ritual. The result of all of this effort is a continual renewal of the cosmos. Therefore, our participation and that of the gods is crucial to keep things from returning to that primordial state, okay, of non-existence. All right. And for us, when we do it, what we receive is that connection with a more fundamental level of reality, which empowers us. Okay. Now, so what are some of the developments which occur in Hinduism? Well, now that you understand this concept of non-existence and existence and the manifest level as arising from the primordial non-existence, okay, that's something that I'm hoping that you're getting. You'll see that everything which follows is rooted in this concept of this non-existence as ontologically prior to existence. And what this ontological priorness ends up becoming is Brahman. Brahman becomes the ultimate reality, the foundational reality, which underlies and supports everything else. That becomes what's ultimate. So you see, it's not disconnected from the concept of Rita, but it becomes more developed and more defined as the concept of Brahman. Okay? So, now, how does this affect Hinduism in terms of practice? Well, what happens is that before, the focus was on doing the sacrifice itself. But now we're going to bring in another concept called Dharma. Now, Dharma is that actions that we take which are in accordance with the order of things. All right? And everything has been created with a particular dharma or way of being and doing and actions that are associated with that thing. Sorry about the earthquake. That's my dog sniffing the camera there. So there are moral and social norms that we start to develop, right? Or that we develop. These are connected with, these are our dharma. We do our dharma, we do our duty. But what's very important to understand is that dharma is not rooted in culture for Hinduism. It's rooted in the very nature of the way that things are supposed to be. Just as Rita was that regulatory principle that ran through things, that this is the proper ordering of things, Dharma is the proper ordering of things in the way that we as human beings, and it's all every created thing, acts in this world. Now, if you want to strengthen the cosmos, if you want to continue to participate in a way that strengthens the renewal of things, then you do your dharma. When you fail to do your dharma, this isn't about an individual lack of some kind. It has cosmic repercussions. That's why it's not just about, well, you do your thing and I do mine, and that's fine. It can never be that from a Hindu perspective, because what you do affects, on a more intimate level, it affects your family, it affects your community, and it affects the very nature of the cosmos itself. So you can't, there's no, this kind of individualistic strand that runs through some Western concepts of religion, just is not the way that Hindus understand the world, because we are tied into something that is greater than us. We're tied into this whole cosmic ordering principle, and our dharma, what we do, is connected to that. Okay? Now, later on, we're going to see that this is operating at the manifest level. Give me 1 second here. I think I have to take the squeaky toy away from my cute little doggy here. Give me a second. I'm just going to throw it down the stairs. Whoa. Hopefully he'll squeak it from down there. Okay. All right. So anyway, what's happened is that this more regulatory function of Rita, which we saw earlier, becomes more and more identified in terms of moral and social norms and duties. And these duties are what we call dharma. So, although we still retain the function of priests to do what they do, to connect us to those deeper levels of reality, so that doesn't completely disappear. We add alongside of that this internalization, which is going to happen, that we see later. How is it that we follow these paths of transformation through karma, which shows us the interconnectedness of all things, through doing our dharma, through all of this, but it's all connected together. So the duties which the priests used to perform became more democratized at some point. Maybe it's roughly contemporary. That kind of democratization happened roughly around the time of Buddhism. Maybe that's not surprising. So anyway, and that's about the time that we get devotional Hinduism as well. So, and it doesn't, in some ways, it takes away the power of the priests, because the priests aren't the ones who control everything through ritual sacrifice. There's other paths of transformation which become much more internalized, which is that through effort, through self-effort, through extreme yogic practices, through meditation, through other ways, we find ways of connecting with those deeper levels of reality. And that deepest level of reality is Brahman. Okay. Now, all right. That takes me to, I was just going to say, what was I going to say about this? I was going to say something along these lines, that another development that happens in Hinduism is the identification of Atman as Brahman. All right? It's very important that you understand this. I've already explained it elsewhere, so I'm not going to explain it again, only to say it's really key. If you don't understand that Atman and Brahman are actually the same thing, you can't understand how certain concepts of theistic Hinduism, for example. All right? So I encourage you to go back and try to and just reflect on what Atman means. That means, oh gosh, if Brahman is the undivided wholeness of things, if it's the one through which, it is the most fundamental level through which we're trying to connect, the Atman that is in you, the Atman that is in me, is part of the fragmented nature of reality that we live in. Because as soon as reality becomes manifest, as soon as potentiality becomes actualized, you have this and you have that. That's differentiation, right? So the Atman is part of that differentiation. It is really real. It's real. But in its deepest sense, it is Brahman. And if we realize the reality that of the Atman, that at the deepest level, Atman is Brahman, that this Atman, this self that we have, is at its deepest level, this undivided wholeness of things. We tap into those powers. We are able to participate in the fullness and wholeness of things, which is the deepest level of reality. That's what you want. What is real is manifest reality, but what is really real and where the deepest power resides for transformation is at the level of Brahman, at the level of undivided wholeness. That's why when you can participate and realize your Atman is Brahman, that is an incredibly powerful and freeing realization. Okay, you live in that realization. Okay, and that's why you achieve moksha. But again, I don't want to get too much into that because that's not what the purpose of this video is for. I just wanted to quickly say something about theistic Hinduism, because in the earlier Vedic religion, the gods were not ultimate. Remember, the gods are secondary to, they're part of the manifest creation, right? But what ends up happening is that, especially with the advent of the ideas that emerge in the Upanishads that I mentioned, such as karma and dharma, we start to get personifications of Brahman. So the gods start to be seen as personifications of Brahman. So even earlier, gods were understood as symbols of what is ultimate. And the more that a symbol participates in the reality, the more powerful it is, right? But in the theistic, in the later developments of Hinduism, those gods start to become identified with Brahmins. So what you have is a couple of different ways of looking at theistic Hinduism. Either the gods can be in some ways, well, they all are symbols and manifestations of what's ultimate, okay? But they also are part of fragmented reality in some way. So are they ultimate reality in itself? Yes and no. For some, yes. For others, what's going to happen is that that god or goddess will become identified with ultimate reality, so it is ultimate reality. Notice what's happened here. The impersonal notion of Brahman gives way to a very personal form of ultimate reality, which is that god or goddess. Well, that changes the way in which I engage and participate in that reality, right? If originally it was sacrifice, in this case now it's devotion. When I become devoted to Krishna or Shiva or Kali, I participate in that deep level of reality, which is Brahman, through my devotion to the god or goddess. So I hope that helps clarify a little. I could say so much more, and I'm really stuck with trying to just get some key concepts to you. So now what's interesting about this, if Brahman and Atman are identical, and you have this more personal dimension, you can see how a god or goddess can really truly indwell as Atman the human heart. So remember that the greeting that Hindus give one another is Namaste, which means I salute the God in you. Okay, just quickly adding on to that. So I'm sorry if some of this is repetitive from what I've said before. I just felt like it needed to be clarified. All right, so in theistic Hinduism, then, it's possible that the god or goddess then becomes identified with ultimate reality. And this is what is meant when a god is referred to as Supreme Lord. So pay careful attention when you're watching a video of the Bhagavad Gita, because you're going to see how, and because there's so many ways in which God can be conceived, some people will be followers of Shiva, some people of Krishna, some people of Kali. But the idea is that all of these are ways in which we access and participate with the deepest level of what is, of ultimate reality. Okay? But the Bhagavad Gita is an excellent example. So that discussion between Arjuna and his charioteer, which is Krishna, is revealing, giving what I just said. All right. All right. So what we see then is that focus shifts away from ritual performance to an internalization through meditation, through devotion. So ritual can still be performed, but there are multiple ways now in which we can tap into the deeper levels of existence. And I thought I would add one more thing. It's very important that you understand that tapping into the deepest level of reality has to be experiential. Why? Reason can help us, and we're going to see this even in Buddhism. Reason can help us up to a certain point. But reason is what? It's part of differentiated reality, right? That means that it's fragmented. It doesn't capture the wholeness of something. So it's limited, right? What we want to connect to is what is unlimited, unbounded, right? One, complete, total, wholeness. That's what we want. And the more that we can connect or participate in that wholeness, the more that we engage with what is the deepest and truest reality, right? So reason can only get us so far. We really need to experience ultimate reality, not reason our way into it. That's why simply knowing cognitively that Atman is Brahman isn't going to get you anywhere. What matters is the realization, the existential, experiential realization of Atman as Brahman. So, all right, so let me see. So manifest reality is not something distinct from, so my reason isn't something distinct from the deeper levels of reality, but because it still arises from that, but now it's fragmented and instead of whole. Okay, so it's not that it's not real, it's just not experiencing reality at its most fundamental level, which is whole and unbounded. Okay, all right. I'm just going to answer a few questions that came out. You can either leave now, or if you want to see how I answer these questions, stick around for a few more minutes. But let's see. One of the questions was, if our Atman is fragmented reality, how did it become fragmented? Good question. Who knows? I don't know the answer to that, and I'm not sure Hindus have explored the answer to that. So, when you look at the Hymn of Origins, part of what it says is, who knows how things all happened at the beginning. So, but I hope I've explained some of it here, but I don't think there's a complete answer to that question. Another question had to do with the cyclical nature of things. And what are the cycles exactly? And one person said, are the cycles like, you have the medieval ages and you have the Victorian age and whatever? Not really. First of all, a cycle is the entire cycle of creation and destruction of this cosmos. Okay? So that's the cycle. Now within that, they say that there are 4 ages within this cycle. Now, these cycles encompass millions and millions and millions and millions of years, okay? So it's not like, oh, yes, well, you have this age for 20 years or 40 years. No, this is like all of existence that we know it is part of this cyclical cycle that we're in at the moment. Okay, so now what to understand is that there are these 4 ages, or there are these 4 parts of this cycle. And the very last part, and this will be true for Buddhism and Jainism as well, but we're not studying Jainism, but it will be true for Buddhism. We're in the last part of the cycle. And that part of the cycle is very degenerative. And it's characterized by a degeneration in spirituality, in morality, in many things. And they give lots of examples. And I almost read some of the examples out today, and then I thought, because if I read them out, you would go, oh my gosh, we are in a degenerative cycle. But I'll maybe some other time I might do that. But anyway, it's quite funny to read it. It actually comes from the Mahabharata, and it describes what the last cycle looks like. And so, but anyway, the point is we're in the last age, or the last part of the cycle, that's characterized by, as we move towards destruction. And the destruction in Hinduism is not something so terrible, because in a way, it's like looking at a building that's decrepit and old and no longer can support itself, and the facade is crumbling and the innards are crumbling, and you realize that the best thing that you can do is to build a new building. And so, but to do that, you have to destroy the old building to make room for the new building to emerge, right? So that's the way they understand the relationship between creation and destruction. That's what makes Shiva so interesting to me, is that, at the ultimate level, if you look at the dancing Shiva, on one hand he holds the the fires of destruction, and in other he holds different symbols, one of creation, one of destruction, because he's the symbol of the reconciliation of opposites. Because remember, at the deepest level of reality, all this differentiation that we have and things that we experience and think of as opposites actually isn't the way that things are at the most fundamental level. So all the things, male, female, aesthetic, erotic, all the things that we think of in terms of opposites, Shiva shows are actually complementary notions, and everything becomes reconciled in his own being, which is symbolic of the nature of ultimate reality, in which everything is reconciled into the one. Okay, how did I get on that anyway? But what's interesting about Shiva is that you see that there's this destruction that takes place, but the destruction takes place because that's what needs to happen to have new creation. That's the idea. Okay? All right. What are the cosmic consequences of not doing one's dharma? You destabilize the very fabric of creation, because the dharma doesn't originate here. What doing our dharma here is connected with this kind of cosmic notion of the way that things are supposed to be. So when we do things rightly here, it reinforces and strengthens things at the cosmic level. So not doing your dharma is actually destabilizes. Okay. Yes, in my lecture I said that there were 3 paths of transformation, and I seem to be contradictory because I say only 2 of those lead to liberation and later change my mind. That is because I did change my mind. In some ways, for the ways in which liberation was understood was either through the path of knowledge or the path of devotion, right? But the karmic path created a better situation for you in a life to come, so that you could move towards moksha or liberation. But now I'm reading a lot more in contemporary Hinduism that's pointing to doing the karma as being a path of liberation in itself. So I don't know. I don't know if things are changing. I don't know exactly what's going on there. It's probably something I need to examine. But I wanted to note that it seems that in the most modern form of Hinduism, the karmic path is understood also as a path of liberation. How many strains of Hinduism are there? Beats me. As many manifestations as you can have, because there's no limit to the manifestations of the one, because the one is not limited by anything. So there could be gazillion strands of Hinduism. Practically speaking, how many strands there are? Unknown. Many. And it's okay in the Hindu idea if there are that many strands of Hinduism. Good luck trying to systematize Hinduism. A lot of sociologists and religious people who study religion have tried to do so. But what we can glean is these basic ideas, but the practices differ so widely, it's hard to tell. What is Brahman is used, someone asked about how Brahman is used both of a caste and of ultimate reality. I can't, actually I don't know the answer to how we ended up with Brahmin as the name of the caste, except to say, or class, except to say that the words are actually in Sanskrit not completely identical, though they're related to one another. I do know that it might be, this is just speculation on my part, so not all Brahmins are priests, but only Brahmins can be priests. So that connection with, that kind of priestly function may have something to do with it. I'm not 100% sure. So I didn't know the answer to that question totally, but I gave you the best answer I could. All right. I think that's it for now. I hope you found that helpful, and good luck on your exam.